I'm going to be completing the entire Pokemon franchise in chronological order, both in a hardcore Nuzlocke setting and without using a single repeat Pokemon between games. So if I use Chimchar in Diamond, I can't use it in Pearl, Platinum, the remakes, anywhere at all. Rules are in the description, including some frequently asked questions from the previous videos. Speaking of which, if you haven't checked those out yet, I'd highly suggest watching those first to see what Pokemon have been used so far. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any parts of this huge series as we lead into the release of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, especially since 80% of viewers are unsubscribed, and I'd hate to see you all miss out. Let's jump right in. Just a quick little PSA before we get into this. I almost forgot about these, but I wanted to let you guys know that if you're hankering for some more Meatball content, make sure to check out the other two channels that I contributed to down in the description. I work with a couple of other Pokemon creators like Wolfie, Aaron Cybertron Zang, James Beck, and Celio's Network over on Beast Coast Pokemon, as well as doing scripts for the Dex Logs, a channel that does top 10s upon basically any topic you can think of in the Pokemon TCG, and it's a great outlet for me to talk about it because I am in love with the card game. So with the fresh generation, it's always a good idea to take a look at our used Pokemon chart so far, and if you don't want spoilers, feel free to click away. You've got 3 seconds. Alright, so here's the graphic. Black are used Pokemon, red are used Pokemon that were KO'd in their respective games, and blue are Pokemon that have been obtained in previous games, but never used, so they are technically fair game in further games, but I figured I'd throw that information on here. Now that we've got the entire Gen 4 lineup available as well as evolutions from Pokemon in previous generations, we've got plenty of stuff to use. But I think we're gonna stick with as many Sinnoh Pokemon as humanly possible without eating away at our Gen 2 and 3 pool before hitting those remakes. I'd also include Gen 1 in there, but in all honesty, Let's Go's candy mechanic basically means we can walk through those games with about, 3 Pokemon each to alleviate level caps, and we'll be absolutely fine. We still have over 300 Pokemon at our disposal anyway, so we should be good to go. Anyway, our first starter choice over at Lake Verity is going to be Chimchar. Due to it evolving into Monferno at level 14, we do get a typing that's super effective against Rourke, though we won't be only using it for that fight. After clearing out Berry for the first time with a few uses of Scratch, I'm able to head up onto Route 202 and find myself a Shinx, which happens to have Intimidate. This one is way leagues better than the Rivalry ability that could have had, so I'll definitely take this as another great physical attacker, as now we have the physical special split, making things like Spark and Crunch physical moves when they used to be categorized as special due to their typings. After a fair bit of EV training both in speed, diverting level 2 Starlies onto both of them, gaining 8 EXP and 1 speed EV every time, we're ready to take on our first real rival battle. Berry starts with Starly, so I use Shinx's Tackle twice to take him down pretty quickly, then move on to Piplup, firing off 4 tackles in sequence after some growls take my attack stat down, but I never have to risk Chimchar and take it out before it has to, so I can win the fight. Easy. Another great thing here is that there's no required trainers between here and Rourke, so some more EV training later and we're ready. Unfortunately, Shinx doesn't evolve into Luxio until level 15, so it's not as useful as it could be, though having access to Bite while being faster than all of Rourke's Pokemon does put me in a slightly more advantageous position. Rourke leads off with Geodude, so we go with Monferno, blasting him with a Mach Punch with priority for over half damage, taking a Rock Throw for a quarter before KOing with a second. Following up that is Onix, whom can't outspeed the priority Mach Punch, allowing me to hit one before Stealth Rock hits. Unfortunate, but fine, as I shift to Ember to do less damage and hopefully not trigger a potion, but thanks to a critical and a burn, it goes down after using Screech. Perfect. Now I can swap into Shinx to get this defense drop off of me, then trigger Intimidate on Cranidos since this thing's attack stat is sky high for this point in the game. On top of that as well, Shinx takes 0 damage since Cranidos decides to fire off a not very effective Pursuit on my fighting type. But that's great, now I can just go ahead and spam Bite while it uses Leer and Pursuit for some decent damage, but 1 potion later and... we're kind of at an impasse here. Bite's doing decent damage, but no flinching means that Rourke can hit Headbutt with Cranidos, and regrettably, it doesn't do shit since Shinx survives on 1 HP and KOs with Bite to win the fight. That was risky to say the least, but damn if that's not content, I don't know what is. After heading back over to Jubilife to go north into Floaroma Town, I'm able to head east of the city into the Valley Windworks outside Grass Patch for a new encounter, this being Shellos. Waterground is always an amazing type, if Quagsire and Swampert have been anything to go by, so having a tank this early that also evolves before the level cap of Mainline and Crusher Wake is a godsend. Speaking of the Windworks though, Mars is here and needs a good ass whooping to get her off, and on her way, I mean. Yeah, definitely innocently intended. Well, not the ass whooping part, that's actually happening. She leads off with Zubat, so it only makes sense that I go with Shellos? Well, that's because of our level up moveset. Shellos gets hidden power at level 16, and we rolled into HP Electric. Not one that I necessarily needed, but having access to both special and physical electric moves may prove pretty helpful. It's a one-shot after she uses Bite, leading to Barugly. I take a scratch for minimal damage before, dear lord, that did a boatload of damage. Woohoo! Water Pulse barely manages to not one-shot as it confuses and triggers her Citrus Berry, allowing for Shellos to take one more scratch, this time a critical, hanging in there to deliver one more Water Pulse for the KO and the win. I mean, sheesh. I EV trained Shellos on Bidoof from Route 204, which yields 38 EXP each at level 4, but dang, I didn't expect it to have this much of an impact this early on. With that though, it's just one trek through Route 205 and the Eterna Forest to hit Eterna City, the home of the second gym leader in Gardenia. She's packing fire types, and I'm packing a fiery Berserk Gorilla, so you can guess how this ends up going. Flame Wheel, Cherubi's down, Turtwig's out second, same thing. Roserade's last, Flame Wheel, yeah, 3 turns, 3 outspeeds, 3 dorks down. If nobody's made a 3 doors down parody song, then that name should be the name of it. Anyway, Galactic HQ time right after, and really there's not much to state other than Jupiter's Skuntank as the Zubat falls to a Spark from Luxio. Spark does over half to her Skuntank, leading to a Poison Gas, then a second Spark both paralyzes and brings Skuntank into the red after a Citrus Berry triggers last turn, allowing for me to swap into Monferno, resist a Night Slash, and go for a Mach Punch to win the fight. Well, that was pretty easy. Now we're starting to get into the right position to expand our team. However, I think we can take out Barry in Hearthome City before proceeding with that. After all, his team is still pretty low level for this point. He leads with Starly, whom I lead Shellos and take half from Endeavor before KOing with a hidden power. Probably should have started with Luxio then. Oh well, second is Roselia, whom I swap into Monferno, but Leech Seed connects on switch in, taking some HP away as Flame Wheel KOs next turn. Third out is Prinplup, so obviously we swap into Luxio, taking a Growl and somehow still KOing in one shot with Spark despite it. Last out is Ponyta, so back into Shellos we go to use Water Pulse after taking a Tackle and a Growl for the win. I'm gonna say it right now, I think these 3 are perfectly fine on their own, though I'm not gonna overly restrict myself with no rhyme or reason. May as well grab 3 more party members. In fact, after visiting both Veilstone and Pastoria City for our next 2 gym badge locations, I figured we'd pick up those last 3 team members, assuming no one goes down and needs a replacement, of course. First up, in the underground, we've got skull fossils for days, and as soon as we find one, it means that we can revive it over in Orberg City for a Cranidos. Rampardos is one of the highest statted physical attackers out there, with some respectable speed, so hopefully Brocktomb will carry us until much better rock moves become available after the 8th gym, like Head Smash or Rock Slide. Secondly, Route 206 can give us a fantastic defender in Bronzor, great for dual screens and status, while also having Light Clay available in the underground to extend those screen turns from 5 to 8. Lastly, Cherubi was grabbed off of a honey tree from the Floaroma Meadows, finishing off the Firewater Grass core that I just really adore having in Pokemon games. Now with the EV training of these 3, I think it's pretty safe to say that Rampardos is attack and speed, Bronzor is defense and special defense, and Cherubi is special attack and speed. Cherubi is actually pretty crazy because it gets Growth, Leech Seed, and Protect, all 3 moves that can help eventually get to a culmination of a game plan where you just start spamming +6 grass type moves at everything, while protecting in between turns with the Leech Seed damage, and eventually KOing the entire opponent's team. It's very powerful, and I'm hoping to see how it does against Crasher Wake here. Wake leads off with Gyarados, so we go with Luxio and trade Intimidates, though I don't care as Quad Effective plus Stab plus Ratio plus your White is enough to KO Gyarados as Quagsire takes his position. I figured I'd go for Protect to ensure he's going for a ground move, then swap into our newly evolved Cherrim, though he decides to go for Mud Sport on switch-in. That's actually kinda nice, that's less damage on me, so I'm gonna take this time to set up a few growths and lay down a Leech Seed and KO the rest of the team. Even a critical hit Slam only manages to do around half damage, so it's pretty easy for me to just swap between Protect and Growth to heal off all that damage, then after setting up 5 growths, I can fire off Magical Leaf to KO Quagsire, then do the same next turn to KO Floatzel to win the fight. Mainline straight after, and I lead with Bronzor against Meditite, setting up Reflect to lower the damage of those physical attacks, then laying down a Confuse Ray and a Hypnosis to ensure that these 2 layers of protection make sure that Meditite has little chance of hitting me, as we're swapping into Cherrim and just doing the same shit again. Growth, Leech Seed, Protect, just keep spamming the power button until I can spam one-shot everything. I managed to get off 3 growths before Meditite even wakes up though, so I take the shot to KO with Magical Leaf, doing the same to Machoke next turn as Lucario is all that's left. I figure that since I'm still at full HP, I can fire off Leech Seed and she has nothing to swap into to get rid of it, so eventually it'll get through all of her items and HP, so just swapping between Protect and Magical Leaf afterwards is enough to keep my HP high, and Lucario out of range of KOing even with a critical hit. This eventually culminates in a Magical Leaf that catches Lucario at mid-yellow HP to KO and win the fight. 4 badges down, 4 to go, won't be long now. So there's a little bit of a mid-game slog between the 4th and 5th gym, mostly to do with isolated Team Galactic incidents, but it's not a problem since at least we're provided with a rival fight. Mind you, with my newly evolved Luxray, it solos it. Spark on Starly, Return on Ponyta, Return on Roselia, and Spark on Primplup outspeeds and one-shots each and every one of them to KO and win the fight. Ah, yeah, that's Luxray, that's just Luxray, you know? One thing I forgot to mention so far in this run as well is the EXP share. This is an easily obtainable item from the gate between Eterna and Route 206 after having seen 35 Pokemon, and since it's very nice to just use Bronzor as an EXP sink rather than switch training it since it has no offensive pressure whatsoever, I find it a very, very useful item, especially so that I can kind of cheese fights before the gym leader since I can get closer to the level cap than I would normally, with everything but Bronzor, keeping it about 2 to 3 levels below everything so that it can just keep soaking up EXP. One other thing is that this actually kind of offsets my little bit of obsession that I have of keeping all Pokemon at the same level at all times. Like, I will legitimately swap around all 6 of my Pokemon and only do 1 level at a time so that they stay relatively uniform. Here, because I'm always seeing Bronzor lagging behind, I'm not exactly inclined to do that, which then makes my play better because I know what I do is stupid, but I do it anyway. Anyway, after a bunch of walking between routes and meeting Mr.
This world is imperfect,
we're ready for Fantina. With her level cap being 36 as well, we're finally able to max out and evolve the rest of our team, getting both Bronzong at 33 and Infernape at 36. I also forgot to mention Rampardos, but in all honesty, he's just not as useful as I figured he would be. Probably more so will be late game, since it'll get better attacks, but for now he's just HM Machine number 17 with Rock Smash, Strength, and later Rock Climb. HM complaints aside though, Fantina's leading off with Drifblim, and we're going with Gastrodon, seeing Minimize as we fire off Ice Beam, thankfully a TM available from the Veilstone Game Corner, taking her down to low HP as a Hyper Potion maxes her back out next turn. All good, another Ice Beam and a Surf later, and Gastrodon's made quick work of the Hot Air Balloon. Miss Magius is out second, and this bastard, oh, I hate it. He has both Confuse Ray and Magical Leaf, so after using Protect to check for which attack she'd use, that being Confuse Ray oddly enough, even though she has a quad effective attack, you'd think she would prioritize that. I'm able to swap Cherrim in, recover from the confusion thanks to a held Persim Berry, then use Leech Seed to ensure this gal eventually goes down without having to worry about working around the confusion since she's just going to keep using it. I do make sure to swap into Luxray though once she goes for Shadow Ball, doing half but not enough to KO without a critical hit thanks to 2 turns of Leech Seed. Protect is definitely helping because of that, but unfortunately she outspeeds and hits Confuse Ray. though I think this is enough damage taken out of her health bar so that Crunch can KO after the Person Berry makes sure that I'm not confused anymore, KOing and leaving just Gengar. Now, this gal's got physical attacks in Poison Jab and Shadow Claw, but neither can KO with a critical hit, as evidenced by Poison Jab getting one, allowing for a single Crunch to KO and win the fight. I tend to think of Fantina as a run killer in Gen 4, so I'm pretty happy to have gotten by her rather scot-free. One surf later, and we're in Canalave City, ready for both our penultimate rival battle and our 6th gym battle against Byron. Of course, Barry's team isn't maxed out yet since he's a bit below our level cap of 39, so I can go in with Luxray once again and clean house. Staravia eats a spark that'll ignite someone's irritation. Ponyta doesn't quite go down to return, but it doesn't do barely anything with Stomp, KOing with a follow-up spark as Heracross comes out third. The only new addition here is cool, but so is a critical hit spark. Fourth is Prinplup, whom somehow doesn't go down to a single spark, surviving just barely as Bubble Beam does a bit of damage, healing off with a Citrus Berry as a second spark KOs, leaving just Roselia. Now I want to show off a little bit, so we swap into Infernape, dodging a Grass Whistle and firing off Flame Wheel to KO and win the fight. I figured I could do this because it would give me a great opportunity for me to point out that the move deleter is here in Canalave, so I finally got rid of Rock Smash and Cut, so thank the Lord. I hate HMs in Gen 4 so much. I managed to replace them for Aerial Ace and Dig while also reteaching Close Combat thanks to the help of a move relearner over in Pastoria City. Heart Scales being available in the Underground certainly helps with moveset optimization. Speaking of optimization though, the only optimal way of beating Byron would be to KO him in 3 turns, though I think I'll need 4. He leads off with Bronzor, so I go with Infernape and Flame Wheel to one-shot with a critical hit. Not sure if I needed it, probably, since Bronzor is one hell of a tank, but this leads to Bastiodon. Since we're not in Gen 5 yet, I can safely close combat this for the KO without worrying about Sturdy, leaving just Steelix. Now I can take that extra turn to swap into Gastrodon, seeing Sandstorm set up as it does no damage to the partial ground type, using Surf to KO Steelix immediately. Now that is what I call a slug jug with you. After all, I am a pro Pokemon gamer. That was the most outdated reference I've ever made, and I am cringing on the inside after having read it. With the 6th badge in tow, it's time for that little tussle between the Team Galactic admins, since we can't get to Snowpoint City without beating them up. These battles are so short though that they're not even worth talking about. In fact, Editor Man, throw on screen Kane rolling Zack Ryder off of the stage.
Look out! Look out!
Yeah, that's basically what happened on both fights. Moving on. Now can anybody in the comments tell me who this gym leader is? Right, it's Candace Infernape fit down your throat, and the answer is yes in more ways than one. Flame Wheel is more than enough to KO both Snover and Abomasnow in sequence, leading to Sneasel third, whom goes down to a quad effective close combat. Probably overkill, but I do like me some overkill. Fourth and finally is Medicham, and despite the normal inclination to swap out from a Psychic type, all she's got are Force Palm and Ice Punch in terms of offensive pressure, making it unnecessary to swap as 3 Aerial Aces through a Hyper Potion are enough to beat this brawling brute into submission. Nah, that's not me you're warming up to, that's the incineratingly hot monkey that burned down your friends. Oh boy, it's time for the slog that is Team Galactic between badges 7 and 8. Oh boy, I do just love running through rooms and fighting easy bosses, despite it supposedly being world-ending scenario number 15. In all honesty, it's not that bad, but on actual hardware, it's f***ing unbearable. When was the last time you've played Diamond and Pearl on actual hardware? For me, I think it was like middle school. I simply cannot sit around and wait for the game to move at a shuckle's pace. Nah, I gotta move! Normally I play all Pokemon games on a 2x speed, since I know most of these games' contents like the back of my hand, and can run through them without having to use much brain processing power, but Gen 4 requires me to push that to 4 times speed, otherwise I'll go insane. I hate to complain about it, since Sinnoh's content itself is very solid, but that's why we have the remakes. They're better straight up because they actually move at a reasonable pace, even though a lot was stripped out because it was Platinum content, not Diamond and Pearl, and they were Diamond and Pearl remakes. We just had our expectations a little too high. I feel like it did exactly what it set out to accomplish to do, and now look at what the modders are doing in this game. I think I should probably give a little bit of a shout out to Yasuno over on Twitter, because the amount of mods in terms of models, animations, new Pokemon that are Gen 5 and beyond being added, including Hisuian variants from Legends Arceus, all of this stuff being packed into this game because it was developed on an engine that people normally use for game development. I don't remember what the name of it was, because I'm talking off the cuff right now, but it's just such a nice, homogeneous piece of game that is eventually going to probably surpass the GBA in terms of ROM hacking. Just look at the amount of GBA ROM hacks we've had. Things come to mind like Light Platinum, Ruby Destiny, Quartz, like all of these old hacks, and then you get to newer stuff. I think it's eventually going to be surpassed because of the open-endedness of BDSP and how they're able to be modded, but I'm going way off the f***ing track with this. My apologies. Sheesh, I have not gone on a tangent for that long in a long time. Anyway, it's time to kick the crap out of Cyrus and Saturn in the Veilstone headquarters. Yada yada, replay Zack Ryder getting pushed off the stage, sweeping both with exclusively Luxray and Infernape. Spear Pillar time, and while I'd love to talk about the mixed battle between myself and Barry against Mars and Jupiter, that would take like 5 minutes since so much happens in the span of a double battle turn. In short, my team Sans Bronzong are all at level 45, and I'm targeting one side at a time. First, of course, it's Jupiter with Infernape, as Flame Wheel on Bronzor and Dig on Skundank do wonders, then Gastrodon can be swapped in and clean up the Golbat with Ice Beam. From there, it's 2-on-1, swapping into Luxray to KO Mars' Bronzor, Purugly, and Golbat with the help of Barry's Munchlax and Heracross, especially Heracross, since I could just ensure Luxray stays at full HP with Protect for Cyrus, KOs with Brick Break. Speaking of which, let's talk about Cyrus's big boy team, since this one's actually pretty interesting. He leads off with Honchkrow as I go with Infernape, since I have zero option to change that in between fights, swapping into Rampardos and taking Drill Peck for around a quarter as Rock Tomb nearly KOs next turn. I really figured that I would have KO'd with how astronomically high Rampardos' attack is, but that's fine. A second Drill Peck does around a quarter again, as Strength manages to get the KO following Blaine's advice of using Super Potions. Jeez, Game Freak, we are in Gen 4. Please, for the love of all that is super effective, stop using Super Potions at the end of the game! Second out is Gyarados, an easy swap into Luxray for Intimidate, then using Spark for that quad weakness to KO. Third is Weavile, so I'm going Protect to see what he goes for, which is Night Slash. So I swap into Infernape, predicting the resisted attack, though I get Ice Punch. Not a problem, close combat can easily outspeed despite the 3-level disadvantage I have, KOing and leaving just Crobat. Now, Infernape cannot do a damn thing without risking a straight-up KO here, so I swap into Luxray to lower his attack, dodging an Air Slash, then taking a Cross Poison, nullified by a held Citrus Berry, as Spark nearly KOs, then I go for Protect as I figure Cyrus is out of healing items, and, well, would you know, he has a damn Full Restore. Well, why didn't you just grab 2 of those? You could have just cut the expensive headquarters budget just a little bit and bought yourself 2 Full Restores, but no, you had to buy a Super Potion. Calm down. The meatball needs to calm down. Alright, Gastrodon's able to come in and clean house with Ice Beam, KOing with 2 of them following a Confuse Ray that doesn't do anything, winning me the final Galactic Showdown. Alright. Perfect. No more Super Potion McGee. 1 Master Ball and a release later because I'm trying my best to avoid legendaries, and we're ready for Volkner. Now, he's a little bit harder than you'd expect, though his first Pokemon in Raichu is honestly the easiest of the bunch thanks to Infernape's Dig, KOing in one shot and even avoiding Static to save my Cherry Berry for later. Sweet. Second out is Octillery, and despite his water typing, Octazooka especially, I can hit close combat, a range to KO, but I always fail ranges. I never hit them, never in my life. Well, it's not a problem as he goes for Aurora Beam for some reason, probably to try to lower my attack? Who knows. Aerial Ace in close combat following a full restore later, and we're good. Third out is Ambipom, one of the other main reasons I wanted to use Infernape, as this easily one-shots with close combat and gets me into Luxray as his last Pokemon. Unfortunately for him, he's got the Rivalry ability instead of Intimidate, so nothing happens to Infernape, though not that I'm staying in. Gastrodon is immune to 3 out of his 4 attacks, as Crunch is the only non-electric move here, and Surf does half damage, so we should use that. Though, unfortunately, a Citrus Berry throws off my plans of doing a 2-shot. With that though, we can just do a little bit of the yoinky sploinky since I ended up getting a defense drop off of the first crunch, so going back into Infernape, then Gastrodon to get rid of it, then use a few more surfs to both get rid of another full restore of Volkners, and of course miss the goddamn 2-hit KO range on Luxray. Are you kidding me? Seriously, I can play into every single critical hit I want and go unpunished, but I cannot hit a range to save my life even once. Oh well, I can at least swap into my own Luxray and finish this faker off with a crunch. Whew, okay. One victory road later, and for some reason, 13 levels later, it's almost like the jump to red, and we're ready for our last rival battle and the Elite Four. Of course, Barry is like 10 levels below the Elite Four, so this is a hell of a sweep. He leads with Staraptor, so I go with Infernape, using Flare Blitz to nearly KO as he goes for Steel Wing, missing as Aerial Ace connects for the KO. Huh. 14 levels, Adamant Nature, Stab, 150? No, 120. I don't remember. You know what? I'm going to actually Google this right now. Flare Blitz. Let's see how much power Flare Blitz is. It's 120. My second inclination was correct. Not a problem, though. Empoleon comes out second, and it's weak to fighting thanks to that new steel typing, so close combat can take it out as well as his third Pokemon in Snorlax. Half the team down and half to go as Heracross joins the proceedings, and since I smell quadruple super effective damage, I'm going for Aerial Ace, KOing and leading to Rapidash. One thing I screwed up on here was immediately clicking Dig without a second thought, then as soon as I did I was like, ah shit, Bounce is gonna kill me, isn't it? But fortunately for me, he goes for Sunny Day first instead, offsetting our turns perfectly as to ensure that Dig always lands while Bounce always misses, KOing and leaving just Roserade to be burnt to a California crisp with Flare Blitz. Speaking of which, if you're going to be at YCS Pasadena between the 5th and 6th of November, I'll be there waddling around beating people up with my Max Rarity Gladiator Beast deck for fun. Hope to see some of you there. Anyway, 5 more fights before Pearl, and we're starting out hot against Aaron. Now, this is what I would say if it weren't for me misclicking Brick Break with Rampardos on the very first turn. Not a problem though, Aaron is the first member of the Elite Four and therefore has a severe level disadvantage, and Dustox's Light Screen doesn't really do anything against my game plan, so I KO next turn with a Rock Slide. Second out is Heracross, and my 10 level advantage manages to barely miss the one-shot range again. I hate it, I really do, I don't understand it. That's fine though, Mega Horn misses and leads into a full restore, so 2 returns can get the job done. Third is Beautifly, and Rock Slide once again takes care of business as it does against Vespiquen, leaving just the odd one out in Drapion. Of course, Earthquake is perfect for this as it's super effective, but once again is unable to KO. Man, maybe Rampardos' attack isn't as good as I thought it was. Cross Poison doesn't do much to Rampardos though, so after taking a second one following his Citrus Berry, I can blast out a return to pick up that last bit of damage necessary to KO and beat Aaron. Finally, a fight that Rampardos was useful in! In fact, most of our team members are perfect for each individual member, as Rampardos was splendid for Aaron and Cherrim is the same for Bertha. Of course, I can't let Quagsire hang around long since it's got some dumb shenanigans afoot, so a Magical Leaf instantly KOs as Sudowoodo comes in second. Now here, I think it's smart to go ahead and do the whole Leech Seed Growth Protect thing, taking multiple Hammer Arms and multiple other attacks like Sucker Punch and Earthquake, eventually getting up to +5 before getting to full HP off of Leech Seed, which is pretty nice, but unfortunately I did not drain all 5 power points of Sucker Punch, so it outspeeds thanks to priority, doing a quarter as Magical Leaf finally KOs. This is why I wanted to get so high in terms of stats though, is her next Pokemon, the Ace Hippowdon. This is a beast of a defender while also being able to attack very effectively, and it's gone. Thank you, Critical Hit. Well, better off super dead instead of only mostly dead. Fourth is Whiscash, another quadruple weak Pokemon to Magical Leaf, leaving just Golem to weep in the fact that it's not Gen 5, falling into Magical Leaf to KO and win the fight. Well, what about Flint then? His team's rather diverse, right? Well, Gastrodon is actually pretty good at taking about all of them down sans Lopunny. First up is Rapidash, as Bounce does around 20% damage, Surf does 100% after it lands, and takes him out, leading to Infernape. Not sure why he immediately goes into his only other fire type, but I suppose I'll take it since a critical Flare Blitz manages to bring Gastrodon all the way down to 54 HP, taking 60% of her HP away as Surf of course KOs, and Lopunny comes in third. Now while Gastrodon isn't really equipped to hit this thing for super effective damage like it is for the other two Pokemon on his team in Drifblim and Steelix, the only attack Lopunny has is Fire Punch, and I'm gonna take the risk of staying in and using Recover. Thankfully this pays off, as Fire Punch even under the Sun only does around 30 damage, meaning a critical before Sun wouldn't have been able to KO. Yeah, I didn't really bother calculating that. After all, I didn't expect the critical Flare Blitz earlier. It's pretty pedestrian from here though, just alternating between one of my special moves and Recover, seeing as Lopunny has access to Mirror Coat, finally taking him down with an Ice Beam and Surf combo through some pretty useless charms. Fourth is Drifblim, and who would have guessed, Ice Beam is a pretty damn good move here, taking Ominous Wind like it was Dragon Rage and KOing with a critical. Last out is Steelix, and we're able to muddy his final chances of winning, KOing with Surf to win the fight. Well, 3 for 3 on the one team member per league member. Rampardos for Aaron, Cherim for Bertha, and Gastrodon for Flint, so who's the member for Lucian? Well, I don't have a dedicated Dark or Ghost type, so this'll probably be the one to break the streak. I do at least have access to Luxray's Crunch, as well as being boosted by the Dread Plate for an additional 20% damage, so hopefully that'll push me over the top. I should have gotten these plates a lot sooner, by the way, seeing as they were all available from the underground. I was just lazy. Anyway, Lucian starts off with Mr. Mime, and who would have guessed that Luxray's Crunch was a one-shot? Well, you didn't guess that it was a critical hit, so I guess we're gonna have to throw you in the Hellfire and Brimstone. Second out is Bronzong, and I go for Protect to see what he's gonna do, and sure enough, he's just blasted. This Bronzong doesn't really have a way of damaging mine effectively though, so I swap into it and use Hypnosis to put it to sleep, then set up dual screens with Light Clay as my held item to get 8 turns out of both, then swap into Infernape to KO Bronzong with Flare Blitz. No heat proof here, only Levitate as the ability, so it's perfect. Next up is Alakazam, and you bet your candy ass I'm not staying in with this, instead swapping into Gastrodon to take a Focus Blast? Oh, what about super effective Psychic? Well, anyway, he's got Energy Ball, so I gotta swap into Luxray. Thankfully, he actually does take that route, so I'm able to take minimal damage with Luxray, taking a second one as Crunch is able to get the one-shot. Fourth out is Girafarig. Congratulations on finally getting a new evolution, falling to Crunch as last but not least, Medicham takes the field. Now this one's got Drain Punch and all 3 elemental punches, so I'm rather unafraid here, and for good reason, because Diamond and Pearl's AI is one of the wackiest things I've ever seen in this franchise. It chooses to go for Thunder Punch, a resisted, non-stab move, over Drain Punch, a not resisted, neutral, stab move. Well, I guess that means all that's left is Cynthia, since it dies immediately, and boy, this is the battle that I was worried about taking down in all 3 games in this video. Her team is very well poised, especially against mine. Though I do have checks for most things, I don't necessarily have pure counters, but what I have is Cherim for Gastrodon Milotic, Gastrodon for Garchomp, Infernape for Roserade and Lucario, and it's all coming down to that lead Spiritomb not having a weakness as of Gen 4. Well, because of this, I figured I'd lead off with Bronzong, setting up Light Screen as all 3 of Spiritomb's attacks are special, getting Embargo and not taking any damage before firing off Light Screen, then use Hypnosis next turn, landing, then swapping into Cherim. I figured if I can get up to +6 with Growth, I can just toss Cherim to the Wolves and hopefully get like 3 or 4 KOs before running into Roserade, which even at +6 should be a 2-shot, and sure enough, after loads of turns of alternating Leech Seed, Protect, Growth, the works, you've all seen it before, also while defending against super effective Silver Wind that does hella damage because of it, I'm able to eventually get to +6 and fire off a Magical Leaf at around 75% HP as Roserade comes in second. Well, I was really hoping that she would be like 4th. Well, just fire off the stupid Magical Leaf, see what it does, and yeah, that's a 3-shot. Oddly enough, though, she doesn't go for Sludge Bomb, instead going for Energy Ball and Extra Sensory, allowing for me to hit 3 Magical Leaves in a row, with no full restore in sight, as I KO with 10 HP remaining after the level up. Huh, well maybe I'll get my wish here. Gastrodon's a one-shot with Magical Leaf as it comes in 3rd, and Milotic's out 4th, going down to Magical Leaf as well, leaving just Garchomp, and of course Lucario. Well, I can't take a finger poke or else Sharon will die, and clearly this guy stuck around to ensure a deathless run, so I'm gonna go for Protect to see what he goes for, and it's Giga Impact. Perfect. I can swap into Gastrodon, take the Giga Impact, then use Ice Beam during the recovery turn to KO without risk of obliteration. All that's left is Lucario, and while it would have been nice if Gastrodon got access to Earth Power for a special Ground-type move in Diamond, it's all for naught. Instead, I can swap into Bronzong once more, taking a Psychic and an Aura Sphere, putting him to sleep with Hypnosis, using the guaranteed Turn of Sleep since Bronzong was slower, to swap into Infernape and KO with a Flare Blitz to win the fight. Yeah, I know that execution with Roserade was not the smartest thing to do. She could have pulled the trigger with Sludge Bomb at any time, but as I said, Diamond and Pearl's AI is just a weird little pool of half-finished craziness, and it seems something is across every game in this franchise completely unfinished, except for Gen 5. Gen 5 is the best gen. But with that, we've added 14 new Pokemon to our use total. Not too bad for a single game, leaving a little over 65% of the 493 currently available Pokemon as of Gen 4 for use in the next 4 games. So let's see what Hurdle's Pearl version has for us. Before we jump into Pearl though, I do want to give a quick PSA. If you get a reply in the comments having to do with Telegram or my username that does not have a verified checkmark next to it, it is not me. I am not doing a giveaway here on YouTube. If I ever do a giveaway, it'll be on Twitter to incentivize people to come over in case YouTube decides to strike my channel for no apparent reason, and I need to huddle people against them because they tend to do that a lot. Speaking of which, I'm actually doing one right now for a Collector's Rare Blackluster Soldier Envoy of the Beginning. This card is worth about $300, and it's the max rarity available if you want to bling out your old GOAT format deck. Following that, I'll be giving away 4 copies of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, your choice if you win, so make sure to follow me over there at twitter.com/ChaoticMeatball. Now, since you've seen Sinnoh once in detail, let's just go ahead and go over my encounters and fights only. First up, our starter is going to be Turtwig. I find myself enjoying Piplup the most in Platinum, while for some reason not really enjoying it in Diamond and Pearl, so we're going with the Boyo Turtwig. Speaking of which, we'll ideally be EV training him with 252 points in attack and 128 in HP and 128 in defense, though of course we'll have to do a few fights where we get unwanted EVs, but those aren't going to amount to much. With that though, we can EV train on the level 3 Shinx and level 3 Kricketot on Route 202 for attack and defense respectively, getting to a high enough level to squash Berry flat. While he leads with Starly, we get hit with a quick attack, afterwards missing a tackle, but making up for lost time with a critical next turn to KO in one shot, leading to Chimchar. Scratch doesn't do much damage, so he starts going for Leer, going for 3 as I just lay in with 4 tackles in a row to KO and win. Perfect, now to get Rourke and Razor Leaf everything. Geodude, Razor Leaf, dead. Onix, Rock Throw, outsped, Rock Throw, then Razor Leaf dead. And Cranidos, Leer, never to be capitalized on, as Razor Leaf deads him as well. Damn, I'm gonna turn dead into a verb, I just deaded him. Before I forget, I made sure to go north to Route 207 for an encounter in which I grabbed Machop. If I'm lucky, this should be my only non-Gen 4 Pokemon on the team. Also, it's pretty nice to use Machop here in Sinnoh since, aside from the remakes who have enough Pokemon reserved for them, it's not exactly available early on. After a pump and dump scam with Mars's Fat Cat, we can move north onto Route 205 in order to get another encounter in Buizel. Why I waited for Route 205 rather than grabbing it in the Valley Windworks is because of our other encounter that we get in the Valley Windworks, Pachirisu, and that is not available on Route 205. With Buizel, I'll be EV training it in attack and speed, while Pachirisu will be specialized in speed with a 128-128 split between defense and special defense, basically serving the role that Bronzor did in Diamond, since we have access to moves like Sweet Kiss, Light Screen, but not Reflect, though Charm does act as a substitute. The last 2 encounters before we jump into the second gym, assuming we don't have any accidental deaths, should be Chatot in Eterna City, as I made sure to grab a second Buizel following the first in order to perform this in-game trade. Then, in the Eterna Forest, I'm able to find Misdreavus. Now, I said I'd like to avoid Gen 2 Pokemon in Sinnoh games, but with Mismagius, I don't know, I'm gonna probably mispronounce it all the time in this video. This is basically unavailable until post-game in HGSS, and I don't think it would be in my best interest to use Misdreavus there. As for these two Pokemon, I'll be doing special attack and speed for both. Chatot, despite being a normal and flying type, hits very hard with moves like Chatter, a stab 60 power special flying type move, Hidden Power, in this case I managed to roll Dragon, a pretty darn good typing, and eventually Uproar at level 37 and Hyper Voice at level 45, the latter of which having 90 power, the third strongest special normal move in Gen 4 behind Arceus' Judgment and Hyper Beam, so we will be absolutely set along with support moves like Roost. With them in tow though, I can just waddle on into Gardenia's gym, then have a bit of a problem with her. See, I'd like to use Chatot, but I can't because of Obedience. This Obedience cap doesn't go up to level 30 until I beat Gardenia, so despite my initial hope that Chatter would be able to push through her team despite this problem, I go ahead and give up after about 5 turns of getting hit over and over by Cherubi's Grass Knot, topping it off with Leech Seed. I go into Pachirisu, seeing a second growth from Cherubi, so I'm a little bit worried about that damage, and Pachi is likely my most expendable team member, so I go for Spark and hit barely any damage as another Leech Seed comes down. Alright, screw it, I hate Leech Seed, I'm going into my own grass type in the newly evolved Grottle. Bite is physical and I resist everything her team could throw at me, aside from Roserade's Poison Sting. Speaking of which, after Cherubi goes down to Bite, here she is in all her glory, using Stun Spore immediately to paralyze me as I just keep spamming Bite. In fact, this is just the rest of the battle, is me clicking the A button on Bite until everything dies. And I think the game is just watching as I slowly dwindle in HP, and while I do manage to KO the Roserade after triggering her Citrus Berry, I get into Turtwig and I'm kind of worried that I'm not gonna be able to, especially when she's using stuff like Withdraw, Reflect, and just whittling me down, though that paralysis certainly doesn't help. Eventually, after like 15 or so turns of staring at this dumb turtle, my dummy thick turtle's able to take it out with Bite to win me the battle. Not bad, I even managed to play around critical hits and still take out Turtwig at the end there. I wasn't exactly wanting to swap out, admit Grottle's defeat at the hands of its pre-evolution, but I also didn't want a risk of losing him this early on. One Jupiter schlonging later, involving Misdreavus one-shotting Zubat and Machamp two-shotting Skuntank with the help of Grottle's Rock Smash, we're ready to continue onward. Grabbing the EXP share is necessary, of course. We need to use Pachirisu as an EXP sink for this point, as Mainline and Crasher Wake have the same level cap of 30. It's not too difficult to get to Hearthome City as well, where we've got another rival fight to pound out. Misdreavus by this point has some decent attacks in Hidden Power Water and Psybeam, using HP Water to KO Starly, then Psybeam to KO Weasel, Monferno, and Roselia in sequence to win the fight. And to think Misdreavus is going to be very much optimized shortly with the Game Corner. Psychic and Thunderbolt, here I come, baby. One visit to Lost Tower and the trek through routes 210 and 215 later, and we are in Veilstone, so we can go ahead and grab those, though I do make sure to clear the way for Pastoria before our doubleheader of gym battles. Crasher Wake is up first, leading with Gyarados as I go with Misdreavus, Thunderbolting to KO after outspeeding. Which is kind of surprising, you wouldn't think Misdreavus would outspeed Gyarados, but that's pretty handy. But outspeeding Floatzel is absolutely not happening. The only Dark-type move he has is Pursuit, so it would be kinda dumb for me to swap out here, as that would just KO instantly. So instead, I stay in, take an Ice Fang for some reason instead of the super effective Pursuit, and KO with a follow-up Thunderbolt as Quagsire comes in last. While normally you'd think the choice would be to swap into Grottle, I can actually just stay in with Misdreavus, as Quagsire has no moves to use here, with Levitate making Misdreavus immune to ground, and Slam being a normal move which Ghost is immune to. Gotta say, 3 immunities on a single Pokemon that happens to hit extremely hard is probably the most useful thing I'll have this entire run. Anyway, we wrap up the fight with 2 Psychics on Quagsire to win. With Mainline though, it's a little bit of a different story. While I'd love to just stroll in here with Misdreavus, I think the better choice is Chatot, as Chatter is able to one-shot both Meditite and Machoke, leading to Lucario. I'm immune to Bone Rush, but Drain Punch and Force Palm are neutral, and sure enough, Chatter doesn't do nearly enough, as Drain Punch takes away way too much HP to be safe. Thankfully, I can swap into Mischievous here and just use a Psychic to trigger Lucario's Citrus Berry, making it so that he can only use Metal Claw since the other 3 moves in Bone Rush, Drain Punch, and Force Palm, that's what it's called, they are all unable to hit Mischievous, allowing for me to just blast him out with Hidden Power as to not knock him into healing range, then another Psychic to KO this Super Smash Brother, and win the fight. Speaking of which, I recently learned that someone modded Brawl to have Blaziken as a playable fighter. I always miss Gen 3 and 5 as reps in Smash as they're my favorite gens, so seeing that put a pretty good smile on my face. Half the badges down, now Chatot will never disobey us again, seeing as the level cap never goes beyond the obedience threshold from here on out, so we can go ahead and rush through the galactic stuff with the berry fight happening over in Pastoria. Of course, Mischievous is the perfect out for this, as Thunderbolt KOs both Starly and Buizel, while Psychic manages to blast Monferno and Roselia in sequence to win the fight. And with visiting Mr. Blue over here, we can finally get to the only important thing before Fantina, the hunt for a Duskstone. See, Pachirisu really isn't gonna be that useful. It doesn't do Bronzong's job barely at all, but what it does have is Pickup. Starting at level 31, Pokemon with the ability Pickup have a 3% chance of picking up a Duskstone upon triggering the ability, which in and of itself is a 10% chance after every battle. So this reduces down to a 0.3% chance after every battle. Seeing as though I don't want to go over the level cap with that minuscule odds, I went all the way back to Route 201 to train on the level 2 and 3 Starly and Bidoof to ensure that I got as minimal EXP possible per battle, so that I managed to roll into a Duskstone before hitting said level cap. Thankfully, we do hit the Duskstone before everything gets to level 36, allowing for the evolution into Mismagius just in time for the Ghost Gym. Not to mention, the TM for Shadow Ball was available on the route before Celestic Town, so we don't have to worry about being one level below learning Shadow Ball by level up to use it here. Of course, we outspeed all 3 of her Pokemon and sweep with 1 Shadow Ball each, felling Drifblim, her own Mismagius, and Gengar in order to win. Oh yeah, and since I've hit level 36, I've gone ahead and evolved Machoke and Machamp as well. I figured level 36 was fair since that's the latest that starters evolve. One surf later, and it's time for the penultimate battle against Barry, and of course the 6th gym leader over in Canalave. Like the last 2 fights against him, Mismagius is once again the one responsible for the sweep, using Thunderbolt to KO both Staravia and Buizel, while Psychic KOs newcomer Heracross, Monferno, and Roselia for the easy win. I think everybody here is very lucky that I do not have access to Calm Mind until post-game, or else this run would have been over before it began. Byron is also probably the weirdest fight I've had to do so far, as having a physical water type means that these high defense rock and steel types tend to wall up quite nicely. Thankfully though, with the start of Bronzor, I can just Shadow Ball on Mismagius in order to 2-shot it as Steelix comes in second. From here, I can swap into Floatzel and use Surf, as of course we had to waste a slot on this special move. Not a problem though, since for sure it's doing more damage than Aqua Jet could. KOing Steelix, and then, as Bastiodon comes in, we're able to KO it in 3 shots. After the first does half, he recovers off of a Resto-Chesto strategy, wasting his last turn with Iron Defense so I can win the fight. Floatzel finally seeing some play is nice. It's got a diverse moveset, including great coverage like Ice Fang, Crunch, and Brick Break. It's just been rather lackluster due to everything else I've got on my team. Then again, everything is lackluster when you've got a speedy Mismagius on the team. Following our little galactic side quest, though, featuring Mismagius doing Mismagius things, and my best friend Machamp kicking the shit out of Mars' cat again, as old habits never die, it's time for Candace Machamp Fit Down Your Throat. Well yes, but only if Mismagius prepares the hole first. I really need to shut up. Anyway, Mismagius starts out here against Snover as Shadow Ball barely misses the KO, should have picked up the Spooky Plate before this, as Candace wastes a Hyper Potion, heal locking her and allowing for 2 more Shadow Balls to pick up the KO. Second out is Sneasel, so of course we gotta swap out here, going straight into Machamp to tank the Taunt? Sure, I'll take 0 damage, landing a low kick for the quad super effective damage to KO. Third out is a Abomasnow, and would you look at that, low kick is a force to be reckoned with, KOing in 1 shot since it's a massive Mon, leaving just Medicham. This is not really threatening since there's no psychic moves on Medicham, so after landing a Strength and getting into critical hit range, I choose to swap out into Floatzel, taking an Ice Punch for minimal damage, as I can simply outspeed and land Crunch for the KO and the win. There we go, 7 badges down, 1 to go. Once again, galactic stuff is very uninteresting, sans Cyrus. Oh boy, those two words together have me thrown for a loop. So we'll just talk about that Spear Pillar fight. Also going in here at level 47 instead of the 45 level that I went in with Diamond, since I figured we had a little less power behind our Pearl team compared to the Diamond team, so the additional stats will probably help. So our pseudo-flying gym leader, Mr.
This world is imperfect.
starts out with Honchkrow, the counterpart to my Mismagius, but it's completely obliterated by a Thunderbolt, baiting out Weavile as Ice Punch manages to do way more than I anticipated, doing half to Machamp as I swap into it and freezing him solid. Well, this is why we have fighting coverage on Floatzel instead of wasting Brick Break on Machamp. We can just swap in, take another Ice Punch for a third, not freezing, and instead outspeeding next turn to KO with Brick Break. Third out is Gyarados, so of course we swap back into Mismagius, as half of his moveset is unable to hit him, and sure enough we blank an Earthquake, and KO with Thunderbolt on the follow-up. All that's left is Crobat, so we go for Thunderbolt, and get outsped. I guess I should have seen that coming with Crobat, but Air Slash does a quarter as Thunderbolt manages to not KO. Well, I didn't see that one coming at all, but a full restore is able to bring him back to full HP, as a critical Thunderbolt takes him out from full, winning me the match. I was probably going to swap out as to avoid the critical bite chance to KO at this range, but I always take free critical hits to make my life easier. One more Master Ball and a release to Palkia later, and we can safely proceed to Volkner to kick his teeth in for a second time today. He leads with Raichu here as I go with Torterra, and he doesn't really have much to use here outside of Brick Break, and seeing as it's physical, it doesn't do barely anything to Torterra as Earthquake KOs quickly, leading to Octillery. Now, while it's a little risky to sit in here against Aurora Beam, I know Torterra can outspeed, though with a 5% chance of missing Razor Leaf. I take that risk, KOing with a critical to rub salt in the wound, as Luxray comes in third. Now, the only move he can use on Torterra is Crunch, since the other three are electric, but it doesn't do much as it's physical, and I have all the defense and HP EVs like we said, so Earthquake is able to KO, leaving just Ambipom. Fun fact, did you know that this Ambipom's only attacking move is Shockwave? Yeah, 2 Earthquakes later and I thought I was going to miss that range. We do KO and win the fight. Of course, I hit the range that does not at all matter, but this franchise gives me crap in the weirdest ways. 1 victory road and 12 levels later, and we're ready for the last half dozen fights of the game. Barry, the Elite Four, and the Champ. No, saying Champ for Cynthia is not right, though it does have me thinking of her in John Cena attire. That was the stupidest bit I've ever done in a video. So of course, now that we have access to the league, we can go ahead and do the move deleter and move relearner and get rid of all the HMs, get some good TMs, do all the, the fun shit of collecting. With all that done though, I'm able to fight Barry, who's starting out against Mismagius, and wouldn't you guess how this goes? Thunderbolt fells Staraptor, no surprises there, as it does to Floatzel as well. Third out is Roserade, and sure enough, Psychic with a 13 level advantage KOs, as it does to Infernape with 10 and Heracross with 12. But wait, he actually survives! He goes for Aerial Ace for minimal damage though, so I just stay in and hit one more Psychic to KO. His last Pokemon in Snorlax though, isn't exactly something Mismagius is equipped to deal with. Thankfully though, we can just swap into Machamp, see him use Rest for some reason despite him having Crunch and being at full HP right now, then KOing with Low Kick to win the fight. Sorry bud, you should try having some levels closer to the Elite Four, so that the battle is actually challenging. Alright, League time, and Aaron of course is pretty much a pushover. Slightly higher level than Barry, but not too much so. Chatot our lead, and Chatter is able to take out Dustox, but Aaron instantly brings in the big guns in Drapion, so I shift into Hyper Voice, doing well over half, enough to make the Citrus Berry obsolete, as Aerial Ace lands for minimal damage, KOing with the second Hyper Voice. From here, it's just a sweep on Vespiquen, Heracross, and Beautifly in sequence with Chatter to win the fight. Chatot is really insane, though it's really being outshined by Mismagius. I kind of feel bad. The same can actually be said about Bertha in terms of difficulty though, especially when I have multiple Pokemon that counter her own. First up is Quagsire, so of course I obviously go with Torterra so we can fire off a Meadow Plate boosted Razor Leaf, ensuring this KOs, and sure enough, 8 level advantage also helps. This KOs and leads into Whiscash, which, not sure why she'd go for the other Pokemon quad weak to Grass, but I'll take it, see you later Doofus. Third out is Sudowoodo, so of course it makes sense to shift over to Earthquake here, since it's a higher base power, taking a Sucker Punch critical hit for around a quarter, as Earthquake follows suit with its own critical hit, rubbing salt into the wound as deep as you can physically go. Fourth out is Hippowdon, using the Sandstream ability to get up the Sandstorm, though that doesn't do anything to the Ground-type Torterra, and I'm able to fire off 2 Razor Leaves to ensure Hippowdon goes down. No criticals needed here. Last out is Golem, and once again we've got a quad weakness to grass, so we fire off Razor Leaf, outspeeding and KOing to win. Now with Flint, Floatzel serves just as good a purpose as Gastrodon did in Diamond, so we have access to both Waterfall and Ice Fang rather than Surf and Ice Beam, which should be good enough. Hell, we even have Brick Break for Lopunny and Crunch and Ice Fang for Drifblim, so we are double okay. First out is Rapidash as the lead, and of course Floatzel outspeeds, hitting Waterfall for the KO with another critical. I think we're just carrying around pounds of salt to just pour into every trainer ever, as Infernape comes out second and goes down to the same, no crit needed. Third out is Lopunny, but something funny comes up here as Brick Break doesn't quite KO, and Cute Charm actually infatuates Floatzel. So I have to swap on the turn. Lopunny gets a full restore, going into Machamp for Low Kick, but that only does around half, and Charm is an ass. I hate this move, lowering my attack by 2 stages and making it so Lopunny won't go down to just 2 low kicks. However, it ends up lining up perfectly, as I can swap on the usage of Fire Punch back into Floatzel, taking minimal damage and KOing with Brick Break to avoid the potential of Cute Charm once again. Fourth is Steelix. Waterfall, even though it's physical, is enough to fell him, with Drifblim all that's left. Sure enough, we have both Ice Fang and Crunch to take care of him, though one double team is enough for him to dodge the second Crunch I had planned on KOing him with, allowing for a Will-O-Wisp to land. Not that it matters though, as I could still KO with a halved attack stat, using 1 more and taking the aftermath damage to hit half HP and win the fight. 3 down, 1 in the champ to go, and Lucian is probably the easiest out of all of them despite the level parity due to our sheer advantage. Mismagius with Shadow Ball, Floatzel with Crunch, pretty much all I need. Speaking of which, I lead Mismagius against Lucian's Mr. Mime, once again pulling out the bag of salt as it gets an unneeded critical hit. Second out is Girafarig, and of course that normal typing is coming up my plays a little bit here, so instead I'm able to swap into Pachirisu, set up Light Screen, hit a Sweet Kiss to confuse him, then use Charm to ensure those physical attacks don't do anything, all while taking a few Shadow Balls and Psychics for a little over half damage, going back over half with a Citrus Berry. This is all that's needed though, as I can swap into Floatzel to deliver that oh so tasty Crunch to KO. Medichamp's out third, and honestly, I feel fine going for Waterfall here. Thunder Punch isn't stab, so that can't KO even with a critical, and we get a flinch with Waterfall here anyway, so who cares? Full HP going into Alakazam. This is actually even better than being in with Mismagius here, since Alakazam is such brittle defenses, being outsped and KO'd by Crunch as Bronzong comes in last. Unfortunately, this isn't Gen 5 where Steel loses its resistance to Dark, so I go for Waterfall for nearly half damage, taking an Earthquake for a little under half. Since of course we're trying to play around critical hits, we want to swap into Mismagius, getting in for free by avoiding an Earthquake, then delivering a Shadow Ball that nearly KOs, but instead procs the Citrus Berry, as Psychic does some decent damage. All good though, as Lucian's no longer in full restore range, so 1 more turn of Shadow Ball is enough to KO, winning me that last Elite Four fight. Now for Cynthia. I am actually at a loss as to how to handle her team, since we do not have a linear game plan. Instead, I'm putting the plates to boost typings on certain Pokemon that can hit for super effective damage and just going unga bunga crazy, like the Mind Plate on Mismagius to help make a range more favorable with her Roserade, Metal Plate on Torterra for her Gastrodon and a Milotic, despite the latter having a quad effective Ice Beam, Icicle Plate for Floatzel and the rare chance we're in on Floatzel as Garchomp enters the field, as it really can't survive 2 attacks from him. Everything else seems fine though. Sky Plate on Chatot, Citrus Berry on Pachirisu to keep it alive for several support moves, and Earth Plate on Machamp to use that Earthquake attack for Lucario specifically. Alright, let's take her on. Firstly, we are leading Pachirisu against Spiritomb. Light Screen is an absolute godsend here, as we need to attempt to confuse Spiritomb with Sweet Kiss afterwards, missing the first and the second while being nailed with a myriad of Silver Wind, Dark Pulse, and Shadow Ball. Though we're able to pull through and get Spiritomb to around half HP thanks to Thunderbolt, being just enough for me to get Chatot in and underestimate the KO. This leads to a full restore as Chatter does around half again, though it confuses Spiritomb in the process, doing the same next turn as the confusion manages to ward off a Spiritomb attack, leaving a fourth Chatter to KO as Milotic comes in second. Well, it's not exactly a good time to see Light Screen go away, but I'm gonna risk it for the Biscuit with Hyper Voice. It does a boatload of damage, getting a actually relevant critical and doing well over half, but Aqua Ring brings her just out of range of being KO'd. Fortunately though, Chatot manages to hang on with just a little HP left, 15 points from Surf to deliver a third and final Hyper Voice to KO. The plan initially was just to let the Birdo go, or he'd survive and bait something out that I could safely die to, but upon seeing the KO into Gastrodon, I think I can do it deathless. I can easily swap into Torterra, taking a Sludge Bomb for next to no damage, then outspeed and hit Razor Leaf for the KO. Well shoot, this is perfect. No Milotic means no immediate threat to Torterra. After all, we've got HP and defense EVs for the incoming Garchomp and Synthesis to outlast her, hitting an Earthquake for around half and a Razor Leaf for a quarter to proc the Citrus Berry. We're kinda just trading back and forth at this point as Brick Break is met by another Razor Leaf, a full restore is made by Synthesis to bring us back up to full HP, but unfortunately she does manage to get a critical with Dragon Rush, doing around 3/4 as Earthquake does slightly less than half. However, that sparks an idea. She only has Dragon Rush to hit Mismagius, and that move in and of itself only has 75% accuracy, so I swap, absorb Brick Break, and fire off Shadow Ball in the hopes to KO, but we miss just slightly, dang it! This of course leads to Garchomp missing with Dragon Rush and falling to a second Shadow Ball. That's basically all she wrote, friendos. Roserade comes in and goes down to the Mind Plate boosted Psychic, leaving just Lucario. I try to two-shot it with Psychic, but a critical Psychic from Lucario ends up polluting that plan, so I swap into Floatzel, take a Dragon Pulse for half damage, and outspeed next turn to land Brick Break for the KO and the win. Whew! 2 Cynthias, no deaths, a little non-optimal play, but damn am I happy with that. I also find Cynthia's team in Dominant Pearl to be harder than Platinum, so hopefully this next one will be a decently easy ride. Platinum's the last of our 3 games today, and despite the fact that I think Cynthia's easier in this game, the rest of the game is a whole lot harder. Gardenia getting Cherim over Cherubi, Fantina and her deadly Mismagius moved up to the 3rd gym rather than the 5th, so your level cap is much lower, therefore not being able to tie stats with Mismagius very easily. The various upgrades to the rival, like having the final evolutions of stuff like Torterra, Floatzel, and Staraptor by Canalave, additional balance updates, and so on and so forth. However, I think we've got a pretty solid pool of Pokemon to still work with, especially with the 60 additional Pokemon we get because of the Platinum Regional Dex. So we're able to go and claim our last starter in Piplup, this time on Route 201 instead of Lake Verity. After cleaning our rival's Turtwig right up, looking at the base stats of Empoleon, it's clear that we should go with a bulky special attacker, but I think we're going to invest in special attack and speed instead. Our defenses are high enough as it is, and being able to outspeed stuff with this behemoth by endgame will be pretty important. With access to moves like Surf and Flash Cannon for stab, and Grass Knot and Ice Beam for coverage, we should have a pretty fantastic spread against a wide variety of threats. Moving up into Route 202 past Sand Gym Town, we can add Kricketot to the team during the night. Now, Cricketot's not a good Pokemon, not by a long shot, and only gets worse as time goes on and power creep ascends, but at least in Platinum, it's a decent physical attacking option, with Kricketune eventually having access to Slash, X-Scissor, and Night Slash by level up, and a wide variety of moves by TM like Return, Brick Break, Aerial Ace, the works. Speaking of Return, Professor Rowan actually gives us the TM for Return right off the bat, so we at least have one copy of this before being able to obtain more over in Veilstone City. Of course, with both in hand, I can now divert EXP between both for speed EVs, pushing both to level 12 and evolving Kricketot into Kricketune before the fight against Barry. It's rather trivial, of course, as he leads with Starly and I go with Kricketune, using 3 Fury Cutters in sequence through 2 Growls and a Quick Attack to get him to half HP, only to bring in Piplup to KO with Bubble. Second out is Turtwig, and I realized that I may have done this the wrong way. Turtwig gives attack EVs, and I don't want Piplup getting the unwanted EVs. Thankfully, we have 2 flex points that do nothing, so we can swap into Kricketune and slash away with Fury Cutter to eventually KO and win the fight. Alright then, on to Rourke. However, we do want to head up to Route 207 for one additional encounter, that being Ponyta. Ponyta is going to be serving the purpose of a physical attacker, as Rapidash has base 100 attack and 105 speed, making it a fantastic yielder of moves like Return, Bounce, Flame Wheel, and eventually Flare Blitz if we need the nuclear option. With them all trained up though, we're ready for Rourke, who starts out with Geodude against my Piplup, and as you could have guessed, this is a bubble into KO because it's quad weak, as is Onix, leaving just Cranidos. Thankfully, we've got just enough HP to survive both a normal and critical headbutt, so we stay in and go for Bubble for a bit over a third, taking a headbutt for just slightly under a third, then another headbutt next turn as we hit Bubble, leading to a potion that heal locks Rourke as we deliver 2 bubbles in sequence to win the fight and get our evolution into Piplup. Passing up through Wayward Cave into Floroma Town in the Valley Windworks, I have a little bit of a scare with Mars following a critical fake out on Ponyta doing half damage, swapping out into Prinplup of course, but then seeing a critical scratch. Fortunately, Bubble Beam does enough damage by this point, and Kricketune in the back, ready to KO with Rock Smash to win the fight, but I guess critical hits do eventually come to bite me in the bum here, but at least we were able to avoid early catastrophe. With her down, the Valley Windworks now contains Drifloon on Fridays, so we can go ahead and grab that static encounter, heading north through Eterna Forest to end up in Eterna City. The gym's rather easy with Ponyta here, sweeping through the trainers as well as Gardenia herself with Flame Wheel, KOing her, Turtwig, Cherim, and Roserade in sequence, all while outspeeding to win the fight. With Cut in hand, of course we can head into the Eterna Galactic HQ, housing Jupiter at the end, who's again rather tough like Mars because of that fully evolved Skuntank. At this point though, we have 4 members on our team, so Ponyta can kick things off by one-shotting Zubat with Flame Wheel. Now we're going into Skuntank, and dealing out a Flame Wheel does pretty well for us as she misses with Poison Gas. Kind of funny seeing as I had the Pecha Berry at the helm ready for it to land, but a Return's able to hit next turn to get her into the red HP, leading to a Citrus Berry proc, but also a critical Night Slash. Thankfully, Ponyta's got just enough HP and defense to hang through it, KOing next turn with Return to win the fight. Kind of funny that critical hits are just starting to creep up on me. That's 2 in Mars, 1 in Jupiter. Hopefully we don't get boned by the end here. Now that we can head south over into Hearthome City, I'm in a bit of a pickle. See, Fantina's level cap is 26, and I cannot evolve Drifloon by then into Drifblim, nor can I get Ominous Wind by level up, seeing as that's only available at level 30. So I think it's time we make some additions to the team. Firstly, upon entry into Hearthome City, we can talk to Bebe in her house next to the Pokemon Center, who gives us an Eevee. Now, we can't use Eevee in battle due to already having used it in Pokemon XD as our starter, but we can drag it into the Eterna Forest with a rare candy found on Route 207 to evolve it straight into Leafeon, giving us yet another Sinnoh Pokemon to use. Sadly though, because we got Eevee at level 20, we can't get Leafeon's level 15 move Razor Leaf until we hit Pastoria City and can get it relearned, so until then we just have to give him Bullet Seed. Lastly, still in the Eterna Forest lies the Old Chateau, and if you're familiar with Platinum, you know what's here before the National Dex, unlike Diamond and Pearl. That's right, the possessor of electronics himself, Rotom. Nest Balls are perfect to grab this thing at level 20, so we capture it and get an amazing Electric and Ghost type. However, we don't have a Ghost type move for Fantina. This is, again, a bit of a disaster, but I have an idea. If you're familiar with Platinum, this game introduces new forms for Rotom, but they're only obtainable through Rotom's room in the Eterna Galactic headquarters, and only through a mystery gift that's long since been discontinued. So naturally, we head back to Jubilife City to unlock Mystery Gift, and with some DNS exploitation shenanigans that I do not have the time to get into because it's a lot of work, we can get ourselves the secret key, unlocking the area and allowing for Rotom to enter the oven to give us Overheat. Sure, we're not part Fire type and therefore eliminating the Ghost type weakness, but Overheat is such a powerful move at this point in the game that I should be able to use it to one-shot Fantina's Duskull and Haunter, then two-shot Mismagius, assuming we can get out enough and predict moves to avoid certain death. Let's see how this pans out. She leads off with Duskull, so we go with Rotom and Overheat to get that instant one-shot as... damn it! Mismagius enters second. I was really hoping for Haunter first, but that's fine. We can swap into Kricketune upon seeing Confuse Ray, staying in on a Shadow Ball, which gets a critical hit and KOs Kricketune. Not good, but not a bad loss. This Pokemon is not that good, so at least we can bring Rotom back in to hit Overheat for well over half, taking a Shadow Ball for about equal damage and putting her in range of another, assuming we get the heck out of dodge, even through the Citrus Berry. Unfortunately, I have to accept the fate of Drifloon here, sacking him off to a Shadow Ball and resetting Rotom's special attack in order to bring it back in and KO with a second Overheat, leaving just Haunter. From here, we no longer have to risk anything, we can just swap in Prinplup and two-shot him with Bubble Beam, surviving 2 Shadow Claws and proccing our held Quick Claw on the last turn to avoid a third, KOing and finishing the fight. Well, at least I only sacked off the worst members of my team, now to replace them with better ones. So with the KOs of Kricketune and Drifloon, we are in need of another physical attacker and another special attacker as there's no rooms for tanks here, we are the Unga Bunga Brigade. So, firstly, we can go ahead and grab the egg that Cynthia gives us in Eterna City from the PC to hatch into Togepi, giving us back our flying type while also adding normal to the team and rolling Serene Grace instead of Hustle, thank the f***ing Lord. And of course, we can go back to Route 208 and roll into a Ralts. Initially here, I wanted to highlight the usage of the dual slot feature that Gen 4 has, being able to get certain Pokemon to appear by having one of the 5 GBA Pokemon games in the second GBA slot on the DS system, but unfortunately those don't show up until post-game. A shame, because Seviper would have made a cool Poison-type attacker for Sinnoh. Alas, Ralts should do just fine, especially since he's male and can evolve into Gallade. However, I'm not allowing myself to use him nor Kirlia in battle, as Gardevoir is a Pokemon I'd very much like to use somewhere within Gen 6, so we'll be slapping the EXP share and EV training him awkwardly, but it does the job. Moving onward with a newly filled team though, the gate between Hearthome City and Route 209 now houses the berry fight rather than in Hearthome itself, so let's take him on. He leads off with Staravia, so by going Rotom, we can KO it with Shockwave, Weasel with Shockwave as well, and Grottle with Overheat, leaving just Ponyta. Well, so much for challenge. We can just swap in for Prinplup here, taking a Light Ember and a Growl, before Bubble Beam can one-shot KO for the win. Before we go into the doubleheader of Mainline and Crasher Wake though, I do clear out every trainer imaginable around these areas, like on routes 214, 213, and 212, the last of those actually containing a very relevant item in a hidden Dawnstone, so we can actually obtain Gallade. And of course, topping it off is the Move Relearner over in Pastoria, optimizing our moveset with those Gracious Heart skills from the Underground, to give Gallade both Leaf Blade and Night Slash, the latter of which I accidentally get because I just replace it with Brick Break because that's a better move, giving us 2 super effective attacks for our next 2 gym leaders. We can't access Crasher Wake before Mainline though, but thankfully they don't have the same level cap anymore, so that's not a problem. Last thing, of course, Veilstone for TMs, both in the Game Corner and Department Store, and we're ready for Mainline. She leads off with Meditite as I go with Gallade, and to no one's surprise, because Swords Dance is both available by level up and by TM at this point, we use it once, then KO Meditite and Medichoke with Psycho Cut, then Lucario with Brick Break for the KO and the quick win. That's our final set for the Elite Four, by the way, and we had it before the 4th gym. Insane, isn't it? One little hurdle is in the way of Crasher Wake though, that being Barry moved to before Crasher Wake rather than after, and of course instead of hopping the hurdle gracefully, we just obliterate it by running through, using Rotom Heat to KO Staravia and Weasel with Thunderbolt, Grottle with Overheat, and due to my stubbornness, Ponyta with 2 Thunderbolts despite the special attack decrease to win the fight. Sweet! One more preparation is needed for Wake though, and that's going back to Eterna City to swap Rotom's form into the Lawnmower, giving it Leaf Storm instead of Overheat specifically for Quagsire. Having both weaknesses to water lets me just straight up annihilate this gym, getting to Wake with no problems and just sending his team to the slaughterhouse. Gyarados and Floatzel come out and fall to 1 Thunderbolt each, leaving just Quagsire to be destroyed by Leaf Storm for the KO and the win. And if you were worried, Rotom does have Levitate, so no need to panic if the 90% accurate Leaf Storm managed to miss, as Water Pulse and Rock Tomb weren't actually going to do much. Cool! One more visit to Mr. Blue over in Canalave City and we can fight him. Oh, right, I forgot Platinum fixed the story and built it up more. After changing Rotom's form back to Heat, though, we can take on Cyrus. He leads off with Sneasel, so we go with Gallade to KO with Brick Break, then doing the same on Golbat with Psycho Cut as Murkrow comes in last. I'm expecting Drill Peck here, and I'm very much correct, swapping into Rotom for the resistance and KOing with a Thunderbolt to win. Sheesh! Game Corner TMs are absolutely OP. On to Canalave City we go, and finally, Barry has his nearly complete team fully evolved. Despite this though, Staraptor is still a one-shot with Thunderbolt, and Torterra is the same with Overheat, leading to Floatzel, who does manage to sneak into Pursuit as I swap into Leafeon, but it doesn't do as much as you'd expect. It's kind of over from here though, as this Floatzel doesn't have Ice Fang, allowing me to set up 3 Swords Dances, use Synthesis to get back to nearly full HP, and KO with Razor Leaf. Rapidash then falls to return, as does Heracross, both being outsped to win the fight. Alright, now time for Iron Island? Boy, this run's getting really wonky compared to the last two. But this area both has strength rather than the Lost Tower on Route 209, and while we don't have to go inside to get it, we want to clear out the area with Riley. Behind those galactic grunts houses the first instance of a shiny stone, finally allowing us to evolve Togetic into Togekiss, so on top of our already broken team, we can finally execute the Serene Grace Air Slash Lock. Don't worry though, we don't need that for Byron. Instead, we just need Gallade, hitting Magneton with Brick Break to KO as Steelix enters the fray. I probably should have set up Swords Dance, but I didn't want Magneton to do anything stupid like paralyze me with Thunderbolt, so I just KO'd here with a 2-shot Seeing Sandstorm. Well, I guess my worry was for nothing. Quad effective Brick Break on Bastiodon goes Burr to end the fight. We're just rolling on our merry way, aren't we? Guess that's what happens when you get the overpowered mons for the slightly harder game. All we've got left are 2 more gym leaders in the end game as well as that pesky Team Galactic, so let's go rapid fire. Jumping past the super easy lake fights against Saturn and Mars is our Ice-type gym up in Snow Point against Candace, and boy howdy does the Ice-type somehow match against my team very well. I started out with Gallade using Brick Break against her Sneasel for the quad effective damage, but Frostlass coming out second manages to put a stop to it because of that ghost typing, forcing me to swap into Empoleon and 2-shot it with Surf. Though that meant that I could go ahead and use Surf on her next Pokemon in Piloswine due to it being weak to water types. All that's left here is a Abomasnow of course, so swapping into Rotom Heat for that nice quad fire weakness meant that I could KO quick and easy, leaving just Cyrus for the pickings up in Veilstone. He's got an easy fight in the headquarters, where I'm able to KO Sneasel with Rapidash's Flame Wheel, but I'm even able to sneak into Crobat KO with a 2-shot of return despite not getting poisoned. Third out is Honchkrow, whose only attack that doesn't do resisted damage to Empoleon is Nightshade, so of course we swap out here to deliver a 2-shot KO with Surf, getting a critical hit to rub salt into the wound for the end of the fight. After taking care of Saturn for a second time though, it's time for the coolest area of Pokemon Platinum, the Distortion World, following the Spear Pillar. I think this place is very cool and underutilized. I do wish there were a few other Pokemon that lived in Distortion outside of Giratina, just to sell this place as foreign, kind of like the Ultra Beasts that they would use in Gen 7, but hey, I'm not mad. I think they did a great job with making Giratina feel special here. We do, however, get a rematch against Cyrus, who's here to show us that he's in fact a Dark-type trainer rather than flying, carrying 3 of them alongside 3 flying types to ensure a balance remains as all things should be. He leads off with a Houndoom as I'm going with Gallade as my lead, and as I think I can sweep with the power of Swords Dance, just one of them means that Brick Break becomes a one-shot, not just on Houndoom but on Honchkrow as well, leading to Crobat. Unfortunately, from here he does use Toxic and outspeeds, so despite KOing with Psycho Cut, I gotta swap out to preserve Gallade, going into Rotom and completely avoiding Earthquake thanks to Levitate, KOing with Thunderbolt, then taking a Night Slash from his last Pokemon Weavile to KO with Overheat to win the fight. Probably should have avoided that Night Slash, especially when it has a high crit rate, but hey, I've got a few other backup plans to replace Rotom in case things went south. One capture and release of Giratina later, and we're once again staring at the last 7 fights of the game, soon to be half dozen as Leafeon wrecks house with Dig against Volkner, using Swords Dance and ripping through Jolteon, Raichu, Luxray, and Electivire, but hey, that's what happens when you give me access to coverage moves, as well as the status move to buff the stat that makes them KO. Thanks, Swords Dance! Alright, now for the last half dozen fights following Victory Road. Despite the level cap only being 59 rather than 63 like it was for Dominant Pearl, Barry is still rather easy. Rotom makes it so that I'm able to one-shot his lead Staraptor with Thunderbolt and Torterra with Overheat, having 7 levels over his ace as it goes down and gets replaced by Floatzel. This guy's got a ground type move as well as a dark move in Crunch, so swapping into Empoleon to resist the super effective Crunch that would have hit Rotom, then bait the Earthquake as we swap back into the Levitate Rotom means that we can get off scot-free, getting back our special attack and KOing it with Thunderbolt, then Heracross with Overheat as his 5th Pokemon in Snorlax comes in. From here, I'm safe to bring in Gallade, though a defense drop off of Crunch makes it actually pretty dangerous. So I swap into Rapidash, and he predicts it by going for Earthquake. Well, this is very frustrating, but I figure he'll go for it again to get the super effective KO, so I swap into Togekiss to start blasting with Aura Sphere, but I'm duped again, getting hit with Body Slam. Thankfully, nor that or the second one managed to paralyze, so 2 Aura Spheres from here managed to KO, leaving just Rapidash to take care of by swapping back into Rotom and using a Shadow Ball Thunderbolt combo through Fire Blast to win the fight. Finally, one more league to go. Do you think we can get through this without losing Pokemon? I sure hope so. Fantina already costs us way too much. First of 5 here is Aaron, who starts easily with Yanmega, going down to Rotom's Thunderbolt, as does Scizor to Overheat. 2 down, 3 to go as Heracross comes out third, and we just pull the same thing we do on Barry's Floatzel, swapping in on a Dark-type move and Night Slash from Heracross with Empoleon, baiting a super effective Fighting-type move in close combat, with the Ghost-type being immune to it when we swap back into Rotom, firing off Overheat to KO. 4th out is Vespiquen, so I swap into Rapidash upon a Defend order, KOing it with Flare Blitz as Drapion comes in last. Well, this is kind of awkward, though he really doesn't have much to deal with Togekiss from here, so I swap into him and use Air Slash, flinch locking him with the power of 30% flinch rate plus Serene Grace to KO after 2 of them to win. Togekiss is absolutely cracked with Serene Grace, by the way, let me just tell you right now. Second up on the docket is Bertha, and would you be surprised, 1 Sword Stance is all you need from Leafeon. Razor Leaf manages to one-shot Whiscash from there, but only 2-shot Gliscor thanks to that flying type. My goal though was only to outlast Sandstorm, and by using Synthesis once here, I can make sure it doesn't get set back up until Hippowdon comes out, KOing both Golem and Rhyperior following Gliscor with Razor Leaf's quad effectiveness, as Hippowdon finally comes in last and immediately goes down to give me the win. Just 3 more to go, I can basically taste victory at this point. Flint's up third, and despite my inclination to go with Empoleon, I figured I'd go with Gallade due to not being able to be KO'd by 2 flamethrowers unless they were both criticals from Houndoom, leading to me to use 2 Sword Stances, then KO Houndoom and Rapidash with Brick Break, Infernape with Psycho Cut, then Flareon and Magmortar with Brick Break to seal the deal. I didn't expect Gallade to be this much of a house, but he may as well be a brick and mortar store with how much support he gives. And with that, 4th of 4 is Lucian, and wouldn't you guess, Rotom is broken here. Shadow Ball manages to outspeed and one-shot both Mr. Mime and Espeon as Bronzong comes out and absorbs an Overheat and goes down because it doesn't have Heat Proof. 4th out is Alakazam, and we're going for the 3-peat here, swapping into Empoleon and a resisted Psychic-type move instead, only to bait Focus Blast, a move that Rotom is immune to, in order to outspeed and one-shot with Shadow Ball. This leaves just Gallade, but Gallade is not a one-shot with Shadow Ball. It has nothing super effective against Rotom though, so even though it could get a critical, it couldn't KO, allowing for 2 Shadow Balls to pick up the KO, leaving just Cynthia. Alright champ, I'm gonna need some content for the end here. Give me a scare. Spiritomber's our lead here as I go with Togekiss because I have nothing else to combat her because the Fairy type doesn't exist yet. I'm able to hit Air Slash, but she doesn't flinch as Dark Pulse manages to connect with a critical for half damage as I KO with a second Air Slash, leading to her own Togekiss. Now this guy has Shockwave, so it would make sense to me to swap into Rotom and absorb that in order to KO in 1 Thunderbolt, but somehow Rotom is unable to KO in 1 shot. That's because, you guessed it, it's a range! After taking a Water Pulse and seeing a full restore, she goes to full only to go down to the 2nd Thunderbolt immediately afterwards, leading to Lucario. Half the team's over and done with once he goes down to Overheat, leading the Garchomp, and I cannot leave Rotom in the active spot here. I gotta swap an Empoleon to either resist Dragon Rush or Giga Impact, then bait Earthquake to dodge with Togekiss in order to Flinch Locker for any chance of a Deathless run, and somehow this works and Air Slash manages to flinch twice in a row, leading to a full restore and a critical that takes her out from full. Woohoo! The hard part is now over as Milotic comes in 5th, using Ice Beam as I swap into Gallade so that I can KO in one shot with Leaf Blade, leaving just Roserade, who's weak to Psycho Cut, going down in one attack to win me the fight. And that, my friends, is the Sinnoh original trio of games, and not gonna lie, despite it being a lower level, Platinum is really the first Pokemon game that truly has intelligent AI by the end, and makes me retract my statement of Diamond and Pearl Cynthia being harder. This certainly made it much more difficult. Heck, it did for most of the fights. Look at Fantina. The fact that she was the only fight to cost me any Pokemon should be enough of an indicator that we're finally getting into the difficult part of Pokemon. Of course, this doesn't last long, as Gen 5 is only 4 games before we get into the easy section of Gen 6, though Gen 7 does, especially with USUM, pick back up in difficulty, so we'll have to see how everything rolls out once we get to that point. But with the original Sinnoh trio of games done, let's take a look at that chart. Just shy of 200 Pokemon used, not bad at all. We're about 100 Pokemon away from hitting 50% used out of the currently available 493 as of Gen 4, and that's way more than enough to carry me through HGSS. After all, we even have a couple of Gen 4 evolutions like Yanmega available, so we should have a pretty fun time going through those in the coming days. Anyway, I appreciate you guys so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already so that you don't miss out on HGSS, and of course every generation beyond this. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.